Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, malcontents. My name is David. I am the Malcontent, and welcome to another episode of Malcontentment Happy Hour. Today is Thursday, April 8th, 2021. Let me pull in my amazing co-host, Jennifer. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I'm kind of tired, but I'm glad to be here. So, yeah, how are you?
It feels like I saw you just yesterday.
I know. You just totally stole my line because I said that to you before we even logged on. But whatever.
Jennifer, there's some breaking news that we have out of Idaho tonight. One of your favorite people has been arrested twice in 2 hours, and it's the fifth time they've been arrested since August of last year at the Idaho State House. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I do. And David, if he would just stop breaking the law, he wouldn't get arrested. What is he thinking?
Amon Bundy. Amon Bundy. Yes. So apparently he has a 1-year trespassing ban at the State House in Idaho in Boise. He showed up there today. He was arrested. He bailed himself out. And he went right back to the State House and got arrested again. And right now, my understanding is he is cooling his jets in jail.
It's a good place for him. Think about what he's done.
Think about some life choices. Good example of white privilege and a guy who has gotten away with a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. God.
In less comical criminal news, there's been 3 mass shootings, Jennifer, in 5 days. And 18 people either shot or killed. 7 in North Carolina over the weekend. 5 in South Carolina last night. And then 1 dead and 5 wounded in Texas today.
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty rough time for gun violence. It's like people are catching up on lost time. But it's pretty dramatic. I did hear something today that Biden was considering some stronger regulations in the context of guns, which is going to rile some people up. And, he's coming to take our guns.
The 2 biggest measures, as I understand, involves, there were 6 that are on the table, as I understand it. 1 involves ghost guns. We can do a story on ghost guns at some other time. The other one, as I understand it, is about red line laws. I'm on the record. Look, I'm gun owner. I'm pro 2A. I am also pro red line laws. They have been instituted in multiple states, and there is a growing body of evidence that they work.
Yeah. And there's, honestly, there's nothing wrong with putting some kind of regulations um, on guns. There's no reason everybody needs to have them. There's no reason that there doesn't need to be background checks. There's no reason for people to have assault rifles. I mean, there needs to be some kind of regulation in some context, because this is insane that we have this many mass shootings in this amount of time. And what happens, we have kids going back to school again shortly, a lot of students who haven't been in school for a long time. We know through the Marysville story that there's been a lot of animosity and tension. And so how do we protect children from people who might have access to guns? And so we don't have another mass shooting like we had in Florida or, in other places.
Yeah, absolutely. In other news, one of my favorite people, Matt Gaetz, I don't think Matt's going to be sleeping too well tonight, because the word is from Matt Gaetz' attorney, Fritz Scheller. Joel Greenberg, who is facing dozens of charges, including stalking, sex trafficking, money laundering, inappropriate use of taxpayer money, is working on cutting a plea deal to turn state's evidence against Matt Gaetz and some other Republican lawmakers in underage sex trafficking crimes.
Sorry, do I look too excited about this? Do I look excited? This could not happen to a more deserving douchebag, to be quite honest. I hope Matt Gaetz goes down in flames and every little thing that he's ever done in his life is exposed and he is punished for being the disgusting, exploitative, trafficking, generally gross pig that he is.
He had a second resignation today. Devin Murphy resigned from his team. Devin Murphy, kind of, if you follow politics, if you follow the news, I would call in political watcher circles almost a household name for somebody who is like behind the curtain. And Devin Murphy pulled the ripcord today. So it's not looking good for Matt. The other thing, Jennifer, before we get to the land acknowledgement, I have to brag. I have to brag a little bit. Okay. Did a weather forecast and a long-term forecast back on March 27th, where I said that the last possible day for frost would be April 11th. And in that, I was advising people who garden and, care about and watch these things that you should really hold off if you can until April 11th. Guess what the temperature's going to be on the night of April 10th. So when you wake up in the morning of April 11th, guess what the forecasted temperature is going to be?
Too cold.
31. 31. Nailed that sucker 2 weeks in advance. Mods and admins have dropped the link to that March 27th story. If you're wondering why am I going crazy over the weather, that's how this whole crazy adventure started back in 2016. I became infamous or famous for my very accurate weather forecasts. I don't always get it right, but boy, I nailed that one. Good evening to you, Dora. And yes, I agree, Ursinate Burr. Jennifer, we ready to dive into the show and start the land acknowledgement?
Let's do it.
All right.
Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We are grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared water of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working toward repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. This is the part of the show where I tell everybody, spam those hearts. Let those mods, admins, researchers, and editors know that you really appreciate all of the hard work that they do. Boomer, Ty, Sarah, Rashi, and the entire team that it is behind them. They are the ones who make all of this possible. If you're not feeling very hard, you at least can give a like. It helps amplify our voice, independent journalism, and it helps amplify LGBTQIA and BIPOC voices. As our social media manager likes to say, we're part of the alphabet mafia. The other thing is, this is the point of the show, please do a share. You can share us out if you're watching us on Facebook. If you're watching us on Twitch or YouTube, you go, hey, there's great content right here. You should be checking this out and feeding your head holes. And the other thing is, if you're on Twitter, you can go ahead and do a retweet. And with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first story. Jennifer, I just looked out at the little screen I have below the desk here, and I just see hearts flying. Thank you so much to everybody for spamming those hearts. That is how we are paid and fed. And I'm looking particularly a little too well fed lately, getting back into the jogging game because my ass has been doing too much seat time. Jennifer, I was able to sit down virtually with Elise Barrett today. She's been on the show before. Talk to us about COVID, and we had a wonderful conversation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and roll the COVID update.
Okay.
Hello, Elise. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hi, we're doing good over here. How about you?
Elise, I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming back on the show. Let's do a COVID update.
Well, we've got a lot to update. First of all, I know we've all heard a lot about phase 2, phase 3. We've probably heard in the news that some counties in Washington state will be moving back into phase 2 pretty soon. To give a little update on that, what happens is we determine that according to how many cases per the population and how many hospitalizations per the population. So as the number of cases rise, in an area, we're going to see an increase in hospitalizations. And as a dangerous strain, which we'll get more into a little bit later, circulates among the population, we'll start to see hospitalizations from illness rise. So in King County, we seem to be we've either crossed the line or we haven't yet. And we won't know until Monday, because on Monday the 12th, they will actually tally up the totals and decide if we actually have a handle on this thing. We know that there are some areas in Washington that are definitely going to have to move back into phase 2 just because of the prevalence in the community and the risk to the members of the community. This actually tends to echo not the density of population, which you might think because King County, Seattle, there's a lot of people here, or the economic income of the area either. What we've seen a lot is that areas that have dispersed communities that are more focused on manual labor, on community in one spot, and families that cohabitate intergenerationally, we see a greater likelihood of spread. So King County does have within its grasp the ability to stay ahead of the spread, at least until the vaccine really kicks in. And at this point, we have 1 in 4 adults in Washington vaccinated, which is actually pretty good considering that we've had sort of a slow rollout. And I know that everybody's heard that on the 15th, you will be able to get your vaccines age 16 and over. If you manage to get your hand on a vaccination slot, go ahead and get it. Don't worry too much about which shot it is, because the best shot for you in the moment is the one that's closest to your arm.
Something that's interesting, the B117 variant out of the UK is becoming the dominant variant now in the United States. And what I understand, Elise, is that the number of cases that we're seeing is in a younger population, in part because a lot of the younger population isn't vaccinated. They are more likely to be out and about. And the B117 variant, the UK variant, the Brazil variant, all target younger adults.
Unfortunately, this is part of the problem with an eternally mutating virus. Every time it passes from one person to the next, there is a significant chance that it will pick up a mutation that's useful to it. It is always mutating, but not every mutation will benefit it. Unfortunately, this time around, the B117 variant has picked up some very useful mutations that allow it to not only be more transmissible, but also potentially a lot more deadly. It's also given it a little bit of resistance to our mRNA vaccines and also to our Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But what we're seeing is that we are actually in a race. If we can prevent this from jumping from person to person long enough that it can't mutate something useful to it, or what we call vaccine escape, if we can stay ahead of that by manually preventing that transmission by staying a little further away from each other, wearing masks in public, and not giving each other COVID, then we can arrest that spread and that mutation long enough to really get a handle on it. And ultimately, If we don't get a handle on it, we're going to have to keep getting different vaccines because we're going to have to hand tailor these mRNA vaccines to each variant as we go. And you're noticing that you may not be hearing as much in the news about the South African variant. That's because the South African variant is highly susceptible to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which means that all they have to do is just go give everybody the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, one shot, 2 weeks later, everybody's immune. And you can't really spread it any further.
And we saw this paralleled with the flu this year. King County Public Health announced no flu deaths for the first time since they have tracked flu deaths. That is in part because the flu wasn't able to escape the vaccine because there was not wide community spread this year.
That's true. It's actually really exciting. Having worked in critical care and seen a lot of patients suffer terrible outcomes because of the flu in the past, the knowledge of no flu deaths in King County is a really big deal. And even bigger than that is that the impact of this may continue for the next few years. What we saw is that without the opportunity to jump from person to person, pick up point shift mutations, we've got a lot better control over and a lot better look at what the mutations are going to look like for next year. So the next flu vaccine is likely to be a lot more effective. And we don't have to worry about it jumping all over the place and becoming more and more mutated.
We were, for the most part, not in contact with each other. Kids weren't in school. College was taught remotely. People generally worked remotely in jobs if they could work remotely. Nursing homes and long-term care facilities, they spent most of the year locked down. All of this contributed to preventing the spread of flu, not to mention masks are even more effective against the flu than they are against COVID.
Flu viruses are significantly larger than the coronavirus. Additionally, once again, going back to vaccines, in the US, we actually had by far the greatest number of vaccinated individuals for the flu since we've started vaccinating. It's been above and beyond. We really got out ahead of it and interrupted it. So what we know is that vaccines work, masks work, keeping our distance from each other is actually pretty effective. And if we manage to use 2 of those effectively, then maybe we won't have to use the 3rd one quite so much.
In Washington State, particularly Western Washington, it certainly isn't all bad news. As we talked about earlier, King County may be on the brink of having to go back off of phase 3. I know Pierce County is well over the line for phase 3. But if we look at other states, there are now 5 states that represent almost half of the COVID cases in the United States. In no particular order: Michigan, Florida, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that a lot of these states that have a high prevalence, there's not really a sharp divide between them. This is not a red state, blue state thing. This is simply, here's where the population centers are, and here's, unfortunately, where B117 has chosen to emerge. We're seeing increasing numbers of B117 also in California, so we fully expect California to join the ranks of the top 5 pretty soon.
Biden administration set a target of 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days. They blew past that goal a couple of weeks ago. They've now moved it to 200 vaccinations within the first 100 days. Do you think that they will achieve that goal? And how do we move people that are on the fence? I know there's some people, Elise, they're just not going to get the vaccine. There's nothing you can do to convince them. What about the people that are on the fence? How do we move them over the line?
First of all, in answer to your first question, I think it's very possible as long as we're able to organize correctly. I know that some of the big FEMA sites, especially the one out in Yakima, are set up for an unbelievable volume of vaccines. In fact, if anybody is really struggling to find themselves a vaccine opening and is able to drive out to Yakima, they currently have openings enough that they're even taking people that don't have appointments. As far as convincing people to get the shot, I know vaccines are a pretty hot debate right now online, especially. It's the same places you can go to read comment sections and find out about how the world is flat. You can also go to hear that COVID was all made up and Bill Gates invented the vaccine to improve our Wi-Fi access or something. I think as more people get the shot and start to understand, yeah, you know, it's not as scary as all that, that's going to help. And a lot of the biggest thing we can do to help the people around us get the shot is to get the shot ourselves. Be really open about it. Be very straightforward. You can take your, shot selfie, your vaccine, what do they call it? Your vaccine selfie. And you can post it on social media, but you can also talk about what you experience afterwards. Say, yeah, I had a day where I just felt really blah. And then the next day I was back to my normal self. And that helps people a lot.
Elise, thank you so much for the COVID update. And we look forward to having you on the show again. Great interview, Jennifer.
Yes, she's amazing to talk to. So articulate, wealth of knowledge. But I think she makes some interesting kind of points or revelations about parts of King County and even Pierce County needing to go back to phase 2 because of the ramp up of the spread. I know on the UW campus, we've seen a 4th wave of coronavirus cases in Greek Row. And so it's not over yet. It's great that we have 1 in 4 people getting vaccinated, adults getting vaccinated, but there's still a lot of people that aren't vaccinated. And they're out there in phase 3. It looks pretty normal to me where I'm at. I'm in the university district, and it's pretty crowded in most places. And this stuff is going to continue to spread until we get a handle on it.
Yesterday, drove back from Bellevue back to Kirkland at 4:05, right around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the operative word was shit show. It was like 18 months ago. It was stop and go, and all of the places it would be stop and go at 2 in the afternoon, and no accident, no construction. It was just volume. Everything I'm reading, Jennifer, and I risk speculating. So I'm only speculating. I'm not saying it's my opinion, but it kind of looks like Pierce County in particular is boned based on their numbers and the reports that I'm seeing. I know that one of the affiliate stations had a headline like phase 3 slipping away in Pierce County.
Yeah. I think we're probably in King County, not far behind it. Yeah, I've noticed the traffic increase too, because I get up at like 5:30 and go feed my horse in Renton and then drive back to Seattle. And even by the time I'm on, I-5 to Renton at like 5:45, 6 o'clock, coming back towards Seattle is already like gridlocked. So yeah, traffic is definitely back to normal.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And we will continue to monitor this story. I'm sure that we will have an update on Monday. Yeah. Elise, thank you so much for that. And we're going to do a little pause for the cause, and we're going to be back with our next story.
Okay.
Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. Don't worry, Malcontents, we will be pitching potato scodes later on in the show. Spam those hearts. Please let those mods and admins know that you appreciate everything they do. Please do a share. And whatever channel you may be on, do a like or a follow. And on the subject of follow, Facebook recently did an update. I keep forgetting to put this in the show notes. Facebook recently did an update in how pages are handled and managed. And it has been, quite frankly, for page owners, a nightmare. One of the things that I have noticed, many of our most active members are no longer following the page. I know it's not because you did anything. It's because Facebook did it. How do I know you didn't unfollow? Because I can see you in the comments when we're doing the show. Like some of you right now, you're not following the page anymore, which is why if you're like, why am I not getting notifications? Because Facebook booted you out. So if you're on Facebook, please go ahead and give us a follow. And again, share, retweet, and one more time, spam those hearts because we're going to move into some heavier topics. Jennifer, we're going to go ahead and pull into your story.
Here we are again. I'm giving another update on the Chauvin trial because in case you guys don't want to watch it because you can't stomach it, don't worry, I'm doing it for you and I can't stomach it either. But that said, there was some really important testimony today, and I know that we have a clip of some of the most significant remarks that came from the pulmonologist. So if you want to go ahead and run that, David, and then I will talk a little bit more after.
Dr. Tobin, would using a short video that you prepared help you explain to the jurors how oxygen gets into the lungs and the body? How we take in oxygen?
Yep.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 950. Can you describe first what that is?
So here we're looking at the lungs inside a body, and we see here that you can see the windpipe up at the top, the trachea, and then that splits into the bronchial tubes. And also you can see the diaphragm down at the bottom. And when the diaphragm contracts, there will be air moving.
The jurors can't see it yet, so I'm just having you just identify.
Oh, I'm sorry, terribly sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm going to offer it, Your Honor. Exhibit 950.
950 is received.
Yeah. Please proceed. We can, we'll display it so the jurors can see it.
Okay, so now we're looking, and you can see the contraction of the diaphragm. That's the kind of pink area down at the bottom. We see air going down through the windpipe and then proceeding down to the bronchial tubes. And then it was going to continue down the bronchial tubes until it will reach out to the air sacs, which will be the alveoli. And now we're seeing that we're moving down here, and these are like the grape-like structures down at the bottom, and this is where all the action occurs. The oxygen goes across those air sacs, and also the CO2 goes across them, then it's expelled back out. So that's everything in a very rapid video.
So then what happened in the case of Mr. Floyd that relates to the shallow breathing that resulted in his low oxygen?
So there are a number of forces that led to that the size of his breath became so small. And so there are a series of forces higher up that are leading to that. And the main forces that are going to lead to the shallow breath are going to be that he's turned prone on the street, that he has the handcuffs in place combined with the street, and then that he has a knee on his neck, and then that he has a knee on his back and on his side. All of these four forces are ultimately going to result in the low tidal volume, which gives you the shallow breaths that we saw here. And so the air will not be able to reach those air sacs we just saw in the video where the oxygen is exchanged and the carbon dioxide is removed.
Yeah, so we had, all in all, there were 3 actual medical professionals that testified today. There was a pulmonologist, there was the emergency doctor that treated Floyd at the hospital, and there was also a toxicologist. There were other witnesses today too, but basically what continued was this kind of ongoing debate over what constitutes excessive force and when it's actually acceptable to use it. So just a couple of things. They're consistently throughout the trial. If you're not familiar with, they're talking about prone. Prone just means that he was laying on his stomach. Prone and supine are common like medical terms that are used to demonstrate when someone is laying on their stomach or on their back downward and downward. So that's what they're talking about there. And so what the toxicologist said, I'll talk about that a little bit first, is basically that Floyd did have methamphetamine and fentanyl in his body, but it was an amount that is consistent with somebody who is still alive, meaning that is not what killed him. As the emergency doctor also stated, it was not a heart attack that killed Floyd, but rather suffocation. And there was questions about why there were no bruises on Floyd if he was suffocated. And there were, the response was that suffocation occurs and strangulation in a lot of people in the absence of bruises because there are so many variables to account for in the context of bruising or leaving behind actual marks. The big thing, though, is that the pulmonologist said he was suffocated. He was basically strangled under the weight of Derek Chauvin's knee, across the back of his neck, and down his back. So he had all of that pressure combined with being placed in the prone position on the ground. He said at one point he thinks he went into a tonic-clonic seizure from an inability to get air. And that might have been one of the things that made them think he was still alive and moving at one particular moment in time. And he actually pinpointed in the courtroom when George Floyd took his last breath. They slowed it down, played it in slow motion. So the jury actually had to sit and watch George Floyd take his last breath in slow motion. So that was what's going on. It was a bad day for the defense today, because none of their cross-examination seemed to really be getting them anywhere or, supporting their argument in any way. And then I did find out too, we talked a little bit the other day about Eric Nelson is actually part of a large Minnesota law firm hired by the police union to defend officers who might come up against charges like these. He was not the first one who was supposed to take the case. There was another individual. That individual got sick. He was next in line because there's been a little bit of a debate among analysts that he seems like he is not well supported by his law firm. And they're like, no, he has an army of lawyers. These are the people that are helping him. But I kind of feel like at this particular moment in time, maybe none of them are really wanting to show their face on the defense for this case. But yeah, definitely a bad day for the defense. I hate to say that it's good news because it's not, but it does support the prosecution's case.
Right.
That he was indeed suffocated by Derek Chauvin and murdered.
Well, we'll continue to monitor the trial. We have one more day of testimony, and then we'll do our next update, Jennifer, on Monday. Barring the news cycle, right? I always say, we don't know, but that is the plan. We will do an update. Thank you for continuing to follow this. It is really critical. I suspect that this trial will continue to go, well into next week and maybe beyond, with the litany of witnesses that they're calling. It'll be very interesting when the defense gets up. What experts are they going to call? Will Derek Chauvin testify on his own behalf? Generally speaking, not a criminal lawyer, but the little bit I know from following crime stories, a person will only testify on their own behalf if A, the feeling is they've got nothing left to lose, or B, they just really don't have much of a case. So if Chauvin doesn't testify, it'll just be interesting to see how all that plays out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it seems to me as of right now, every witness that has come up, that they've tried to build this case that, there was reason to use this excessive force, that the crowd was somehow unruly. Every expert witness they've called up thus far has refuted that. Like, they're trained to deal with these kinds of situations. There was no reason to continue to restrain him in that way after he was handcuffed prone on the ground. So I don't know. It'll be interesting if we know that if he testifies, then that he really thinks he's in big trouble.
Yeah, and we will see how all of that plays out. A little bit pause for the cause, and we're going to go on to our next segment.
All right.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington, between 180th and 170th on the west side of the highway. They have amazing coffee from Africa. They have amazing merch. And don't forget to ask for the potato scones. You know, Jennifer, one of these days we're going to play the black coffee ad. We're just going to cut the camera to me, and I'm going to be eating a potato scone, and I'm not going to say anything. So,
did you get
day,
did you get the comments in the comment section?
I have. I've seen all the comments on the potato scone. It's becoming like an inside joke almost here for Malcontents. But very seriously, if you're new to the show, they have a potato scone. It is like a baked potato with cheese and onion, had a baby with like this flaky, perfect scone. It is absolutely amazing. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. Jennifer, I'm going to remind folks out there to spam those hearts. Let people know. Are we ready? Are we ready for it?
Let's do it.
It's time for Malcontented Minutes. It is time where you get to pick the news. Mods and admins, go ahead and drop the link over into the comments. Go ahead and drop the link to the poll. A poll? Yes, there is a poll. Jennifer and I have 20 minutes. We have 10 stories that are teed up. We don't stick hard and fast to the 20 minutes, but we're going to try because the show's running a little over tonight. So we're going to try to keep it squeezed. And we get 1 minute to tell the story, 1 minute to unpack the story. You, the viewers, get to vote on the story that you want Jennifer and I to talk more about for a little bit at the end of the show. So mods and admins, go ahead and drop that link. Make sure you do it across the different channels. Jennifer, you're in the lead position tonight. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, we're starting the timer. There we go.
So this has a little bit of a Washington-Seattle connection. So an Indigenous lawyer has been nominated as the solicitor of the Interior Department. It was announced yesterday that Robert Anderson, member of the Boy Fort Band of the Minnesota Chippewa or Ojibwe peoples, has been formally nominated for the solicitor position. Anderson has served as the Interior's principal deputy solicitor since January 20th, 2021, the start of the Biden administration. Anderson actually worked at the UW as a law professor for 2 decades and directed our Native American Law Center. He has also held visiting positions at Harvard. He has co-authored a couple really important texts, including Cohen's Handbook of American Indian Law, and previously served as the Associate Solicitor for Indian Affairs during the Clinton administration. Them Republicans aren't going to like another Indigenous person in the Interior Department. You know, those Indigenous people don't know how to make decisions in the best interest of their own people, David.
What a crazy concept. The original first peoples of the nation being responsible for taking care of the lands and resources of the First Nation, of the nation, I should say. What a concept. I know, Jennifer, that I approve. And with that I'm going to take the liberty to say that's all I've got. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to story number 2. All right, so let's reset the clock. Story number 2, 28-year-old Joseph Russo is charged with multiple hate crimes after being arrested for 3 different attacks on Asians in Brooklyn, New York.
And this one man, they say, is responsible for a month-long xenophobic, anti-Asian crime spree here in Brooklyn. And later on today, that man, whose name is Joseph Russo, will be in front of a judge facing a slew of charges here at court. Now, the most recent attack happening on Monday in Sheepshead Bay. Detectives say this is the 28-year-old caught on camera outside the J&R supermarket moments before shoving a 77-year-old shopper to the ground without provocation or saying a word. Also, last month, this disturbing scene playing out in Midwood along a row of retail shops. This is who police say is Russo, randomly grabbing a 32-year-old Asian woman by the hair and struggling with her, again, not saying anything or having any prior interaction.
Jennifer, you got 55 seconds.
So did the police say he was just having a bad day? I'm just curious. What a douche. Like, who does that? What an actual douchebag. back again to, I hate to say it again, but them damn white men of a particular age and generation have some real issues with white privilege and shit that they need to work through, come to terms with.
He totally has like the douchebag swagger in that first video clip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying all white men. So before somebody says not all men to me, because I hear that a lot, I'm saying there are a particular like subset of white men of a particular generation, actually across multiple generations, that are still so invested in this idea of white supremacy and entitlement that this is the way they behave.
All right, Jennifer, story number 3.
Oh, Virginia. I gotta find my story notes now because I'm out of order here. So actually, Virginia becomes the first state in what's considered the South to ban gay and trans panic as a murder defense. So, yay, Virginia, but how was this ever an acceptable defense to murder prior to this is beyond me. Virginia is actually the 12th state, including Washington and California, that no longer permits people charged with killing a person who identifies as LGBTQIA to receive a reduced sentence because of that. The bill was introduced by Representative Danica Roem, and Governor Ralph Northam signed it into law last week. It's just such a weird thing to me to consider that was ever a reasonable defense in the first place. But I'm glad that at least 12 states now have done away with it.
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
Why? I didn't know this was a thing. And like they have to make a law to say you can't use this as a defense. That's where the bar is at. I like Jennifer. This was like when you shared this with me today. I'm horrified. I'm happy this was passed, but I'm horrified that some lawyer somewhere was like, "You panicked because they were gay, and we're gonna get you a lighter sentence by coming up with this. You panicked." And some judge, and then probably some appeals court said, "That works."
Yeah, I know this was like mind-blowing to me that this was even a thing, but here we are.
And they say they're the snowflakes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm moving on to story number 4. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we have a story about that later tonight. Some of you may know the significance of the pink triangle and how the Nazis used that to identify LGBTQ prisoners. Prior to Hitler becoming chancellor in 1933, Germany had a thriving gay culture, and Berlin was considered the gay capital of the world. Starting in 1935, up to 100,000 people were arrested. About 15,000 of those ended up in concentration camps. Their suffering, though, didn't end at liberation. Sadly for many, it just continued. Some even found themselves going through the courts a second time, being arrested for what was called antisocial behavior and being in prison. It wasn't until the 1970s when these survivors were acknowledged. The 1966 musical Cabaret helped raise some awareness to this, along with the Mel Brooks movie To Be or Not to Be. So on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it is proper to remember all victims of the Nazis, including the LGBTQ community. Jennifer, you have 45 seconds.
So I think I'm going to, since we're doing a light story on our little story on this a little later, I think I'm going to save my commentary for then, so I don't go over and repeat myself.
Fair enough. We will go ahead and reset the timer and move on to story 5.
Hey guys, guess what? Even though Joe Biden got elected, there's still a lot of problems at the border, like tons of problems. So according to the Washington Post, March of 2021 was the busiest month at the border in nearly 2 decades, with the U.S. taking in 172,331 migrants into custody. This includes almost 19,000 teens and children that arrived without their parents. And compared to March of 2020, this number is nearly 3 times higher. Custom and Border Patrol notes that many migrants are part of repeat crossing attempts, and some were previously expelled under the Trump administration's emergency health order called Title 42. And while Biden has publicly addressed the ongoing crisis, this begs 2 very important questions. Why are people migrating in such huge numbers? And what role does ongoing U.S. intervention in Latin America play in these mass migrations?
Jennifer, I'm so like you were 60 seconds to the dot. It was impressive.
Thank you.
You had 2 Category 5 hurricanes devastate Latin America within just a couple of weeks apart of each other. Nicaragua, a country close to my heart, actually didn't get it as bad as Guatemala and Honduras to their north, which were just devastated. The other thing that's happening is a lot of these countries depend on tourism, and COVID has absolutely gutted that. Not to mention they've had a relatively impotent COVID response in Latin America for a litany of reasons that I can't unpack for in 60 seconds. The other thing is you just have a lot of dirtballs that are lying to desperate people going, hey, the border's just wide on open because Joe Biden's president, and they're so desperate that they believe it. So they're going into debt for thousands upon thousands of dollars to find it's all a lie. And that's my unpack, and I'm going to go ahead and remind you that there's a poll. Mods, admins, go ahead and drop the poll link one more time. We're halfway through the lineup. If we've covered a story and you're like, I want David and Jennifer to unpack that story more, you can vote. But we always like to say you should wait until we've given you the full meal deal. But we can go ahead and drop the link into the poll one more time so people know where it is, and you can see those list of stories coming up. You may look at that list and go, I want to vote for this one now. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the timer and go to story number 6. Amazon's challenging hundreds of union ballots in Alabama, and it sure looks like the measure is failing. There were reports tonight, as we predicted, Amazon's challenged hundreds of ballots in the vote for unionization in Alabama. The New York Times reported that about 55% of employees participated, so about 2,800 people voted. It is worth noting, not all employees were eligible to vote. There has not been a breakdown of eligible voting employees that actually voted in that number. Early reports are indicating that the measure is failing by a very wide margin, as much as a gap of 2 to 1. However, both sides are making it very clear that they are lining up for a long legal battle. Jennifer, you get some bonus time.
5 words, people. 5. Count 5. Seize the means of production. Capitalism sucks. Worker exploitation. This is divisive. These tactics were like intentionally divisive that were deployed by Amazon to create conditions like this. And now you're going to have increased animosity in the workplace. You're going to have people not getting the protections that they need. And Amazon and Jeff Bezos in particular are going to continue to line their pockets. That's all I got.
All right. So we'll roll you over then to your story number 7.
Ooh. Yeah. What kind of asshole pays their former employee in pennies? Well, let me tell you, this one asshole in Georgia did.
After waiting for months, man in Georgia
Andreas,
finally...
you're going to play the clip, sorry.
After waiting for months, man in Georgia finally got paid from his last job, delivered to him in pennies, dumped in the driveway. What a class move, right, by his former boss. Andreas Fladden left his job at an auto repair shop in November, waited a long time for his final check, even contacted the Department of Labor, that is, for help. He finally got paid $915, all in pennies, dumped in the driveway, covered in some kind of oil or grease. Now he spends every night in the garage, cleaning them off one by one.
I think that's going to be a lot of work for money I've already worked for. It's going to be hours upon hours of just trying to clean this money up just so it's even able to be spent. It's definitely not fair at all.
Jennifer, I've reset the clock because I hit the button too soon and we just messed it all up. So I'm sorry, you can go.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say you covered most of it, but I just want to add that when he left the pile of pennies in the yard, he also added a sweet little note for his former employee that said, "Fuck you," and this pile of pennies. But Coinstar kind of jumped in, heard about the story. They came and actually picked all of the coins up and then cashed them in for the man, and he got his paycheck in cash instead of coins. But I just want to point out the name and location of this place in case you're in Fayetteville, Georgia, or somewhere in that area and need automotive work. Don't go here. This is the pennies came from Miles Walker, owner of the OK Walker Auto Works Body Shop in Peachtree City, Georgia. Don't use that man's business if you're in Georgia and your car breaks down. Find a different place. I'll even help you. Just message me.
Peachtree City would be outside of Atlanta, if I remember my Georgia geography. I know we're a little over time in this story. I just want to say I love that the talking head broke the fourth frame and had a malcontented minute. Malcontented moment, I should say, when he made this little editorial comment about, what a guy or something like that. Yeah. I just busted out laughing the first time I saw that clip, because it's like I'm thinking to myself, Jennifer, there's no way that was on the teleprompter. He read that story and was just like, ow, my brain. All right. If you want us to unpack that more, you can. We'll talk about it more. Let me go to story number 8. The Kitsap Sun is reporting that a 61-year-old Silverdale man who lives in the Vintage at Silverdale Senior Apartments was tripping balls on acid and went on a rampage. According to officials, they received an automated 911 call after a fire alarm was pulled. When police arrived, a chair was smashed through a 4th floor window. The police report extensive damage to furniture, fixtures, and 9 broken windows. The unnamed man was taken to St. Michael Medical Center, where he made threats of violence, rape, and used racial slurs. His wife said that he frequently uses acid, but may have taken a little bit too much, and he got some bad stuff. He is booked in the Kitsap County Jail.
Open the doors of perception.
Meanwhile, look at me.
You come here to kill me. Bullfrog kill.
Meanwhile.
What do you even say to that? The dude clearly had a bad trip. Well, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about he's threatening violence, rape, and hurling all these racial slurs, which has to be somewhere already within his character and part of his true self, because I don't think you can just blame that on a bad acid trip.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, but maybe the dude should stop tripping balls on acid, or maybe check where he's getting his supply from, because that clearly was not good shit. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I wish there was video to this story. I really do.
Yeah.
I could just picture the police pulling up to a senior living apartment building thinking they're on a fire alarm call. And then a chair comes flying out of the 4th floor window to the sound of shattering glass. All right, Jennifer, with that, you can start story number 9.
I was a little conflicted using this as my feel-good story, because I think part of it is a little bit gross, but I'm kind of glad they made amends, and the people who got the opportunity to share their creativity and performance got to do it. So on a recent segment of The Tonight Show, TikTok star Addison Rae showed Jimmy Fallon how to perform some of the most popular TikTok dances. Not long after, Fallon and Rae came under fire for not allowing the actual curators and performers to demonstrate their work. All of them except one were BIPOC. After increasing backlash, however, Fallon actually brought the creators and performers onto The Tonight Show to discuss how they developed the dances and then performed them. While the initial oversight is still super cringeworthy, I will give credit where credit is due, and Fallon and The Tonight Show get some for attempting to right that wrong. So congratulations to the creators and performers for getting to share their own work and get the credit for it that they deserve.
Yeah, I like this story. It's a good story. Jimmy Fallon comes across as the kind of guy who should know better in the first place, but I always like it when people in these positions don't dig a hole for themselves and just double down on the wrong or hope that it goes away. And so for that, I will say that Jimmy Fallon did the right thing. Jennifer, I wouldn't normally do this on the air. What's been happening? You've been wiggling through the show, not like wiggling like this, but like wiggling over. And I need you to take like one step over closer to your mirror. There you go. You're almost getting covered up by our comet stream when we go full frame. And on the subject of full, I'm sorry?
I'm super fidgety tonight, so I've been moving back and forth.
You are framed much better now. And with that, we're going to go ahead and reset the timer, and we're going to go to story number 10. Story number 10. Enjoy some ringtail lemurs at the zoo.
I think it's a squirrel.
Welcome, giant pansies. Please feel free to bask in my glow.
Definitely a squirrel.
Yep, squirrel.
Jennifer, you got 60 seconds.
I don't have anything to say. How do you even follow that? They're adorable. However, I would have liked to see you perform the I Like to Move It song from Madagascar. That would have really put like the cherry on top of the icing for me.
On the subject. Go ahead. Sorry.
And probably others. Others would have enjoyed that too. I'm sure.
On the subject of something like that, that would probably be a really fast way to get knocked off the air. Jennifer, remember we did the UFC story and we got knocked off the air on Facebook when we did the UFC story?
Yeah, I do
Facebook
remember.
just sent their apology letter to us 2 days ago. By the way, I forgot to mention that to you.
Whatever, Zuckerberg.
To be a content creator. By the way, Converge Media Omari, hello, and thank you for sharing the stream. And it's time to vote. I saw that the link was dropped in one more time already. Go ahead and vote on your favorite story. By the way, if your favorite story was lemurs, vote on lemurs. We know there's nothing to unpack. We'll just play the video a second time if you want to see lemurs. Jennifer, I think one day we are going to see the animals win. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump for a quick pause for the cause. We're going to go to our last story for the night. Holocaust Remembrance Week aligns this year to the liberation of Buchenwald. And because the exiting of that camp was over a week, the discovery and the communications happened in the middle of that week, and official liberation happened on April 11th. Today was Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. If you're not familiar with this, siren sound and everything stops in that moment while it's going on. I'm going to play a clip. There's nothing in the clip, but I will say if you're neurodivergent and you are sensitive to sounds, you might find this video clip a little irritating. So I'm just going to have that caveat. There's nothing else in there that's alarming. So, a lot of people don't have a full understanding on the Holocaust. The Nazi final solution for the Jewish peoples didn't really start in earnest until 1942. And what I mean by that is the actual wholesale industrial grade execution and extermination of human beings. The failure of the Russian front and the ability to take Moscow is actually what started this final solution from being implemented. Originally, the idea was that the Jewish peoples would be put somewhere in the Balkans. And then when France collapsed, it was, we're going to put them to Madagascar because France controlled Madagascar. And then when they started Operation Barbarossa and invaded Russia, it was going to be, Stalin has all these gulags out in Russia. When we're done overtaking Russia, we'll just move everybody to Siberia and use the existing Russian infrastructure. And that is what happened. The first concentration camp that was built was Dachau, and Dachau opened in 1933. Dachau did not hold Jews. It held socialists, communists, trade union leaders, college professors, activists, journalists. Forget my Jewish faith, it included people like us. And what it included largely was people that were enemies of Adolf Hitler. Yes, there's a trope that goes around that Adolf Hitler was a socialist, simply because the name socialist is in the name of the Nazi party. But that's like saying North Korea is a democracy simply because they have democratic in their name. Buchenwald was notorious even by death camp standards. Ilse Koch was known as the bitch of Buchenwald. She was so evil. Jennifer, the Nazis arrested her in 1943. She was known for having collections of cured and mummified human skins, tattoos. She had a lamp that was made with the foot as the base of a human being.
Yep.
Buchenwald was officially liberated on April 11th. And as U.S. troops were closing in, the Germans started to evacuate prisoners out of the camp. They wanted to actually blow up the camp and kill all the prisoners to eliminate any evidence that the camp had existed. A Polish POW who had survived in Buchenwald since 1941, who was a radio man in the Polish army, had built a shortwave radio and a small generator that they kept hidden in a movie room. I mean, think almost like Stalag 17, the movie, or Hogan's Heroes. The resistance leaders in the camp decided that their situation was so desperate on April 8th, 1945, today. They needed to risk having the radio detected and being killed before all the prisoners were evacuated out and would certainly die anyway. They typed out a message in Morse code to the Army of General Patton. This is the Buchenwald concentration camp, SOS. We request help. They want to evacuate us. The SS wanted to destroy us. They had no idea if they were going to get a response. They got a response. The radio operator actually fainted when they got a response. And the response that they got was, Kilo Zulu, Bravo uniform. And I know that that was not the phonetic alphabet of the day. I am modernizing it. Hold out, rushing to your aid, staff of 3rd Army. The inmates staged an uprising. They had using weapons that they had stolen since 1942. They had 92 rifles, Jennifer, and 1 machine gun. They overran the small group of guards. They literally tore some of them to pieces with their bare hands. They took some others as prisoners. And it was during this uprising that a lone U.S. soldier arrived at the prison camp. His name was Rick Carrier, and we have an interview with him.
Rick Carrier is one such hero. The World War II veteran was the first American to discover Germany's Buchenwald camp, ultimately leading to its liberation. I spoke to Rick Carrier, and now, even at 90 years old, he relives that day in incredible detail. Here is his story.
I saw the opening of Buchenwald, the main gate, and I went up there because I wanted to find basic material for engineering. That we needed rocks, we need timber, we needed greenery, we need all sorts of stuff to build roads with. And that was my job, was to find these things. When we went up to the camp and went in there, I was very cautious. And when I got in there and looked at it, I said, woo. I parked the Jeep in the woods and then walked around the other side, and they were over to the barbed wire fence. When I got there, I looked down, and there was a guy crawling underneath the wire because they'd cut off the electricity. And he was snaking underneath the wire, and the barbed wire was ripping his back like a cat was ripping apart. And I mean, his back was just streaks of blood. It's torn up because he wanted out of there. Yeah. I got down and I got my clippers out and I cut a big oval in the barbed wire, and he got out. But when he got out, he stood up. Now this man was nothing more than a human skeleton with skin on it. His eyes were black rings and little dots in them for the irises. Every part of his body had sores on it, vituperating pus coming out of the eyes. But he came at me, and I saw something in his eye that I had never seen before.
What was that?
I could see love, and I could see affection pouring out of the eye, this body, and the hands on it, and he couldn't speak. And he was walking toward me, shuffling, and he knew what I gave him. But he wanted to tell me that, and behind him was 3 others coming out with him, and they come over to him, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. Now, the odor in this situation was unbelievable. You think about a rotten egg, well, just think of rotten egg and a dozen other things that are foul smelling, because that woofed in me, and I felt myself begin to collapse again, because that happened earlier, and I really started to go down. I said, no, I can't do this. So I backed up a little bit. When I backed up, I heard machine gun fire, and behind me, up in the tower, clock tower in the front, the machine gun bullets knocked the glass out of the front, and I looked up, and it was 3:15 in the afternoon. It stopped. And I said, it's time to get out of here. I spoke to my colonel. He said, I'd already spoken to the Eisenhower's office and also Patton's office, and I want you to go up there, back to the camp, and be there tomorrow morning at 8:30, so that when the tank comes down from this 8th Army Tank Corps, you show him where this is. And then he'll go up, and you then blow off the rope and get it with him, and then call us and tell us it's okay to come up. So that became the official opening day for Liberation Day for Buchenwald. And so that, the 11th, is the official day. That way we had everything up. But when we got up there, the tank got up there, I blew the lock off the gate. The lock was nothing more than a chain and I wrapped primer cord around the chain, and they were like a pair of big shears cutting it off. And the lock fell on the ground, and the chain fell, and the hand of one of those guys come out and took it in, a souvenir. And then the gate slid open, the tank went in, and all the guys piled out and started giving chocolate to it. And they didn't know at the time, but 2 pellets took the chocolate and ate them. And they took 3 steps and fell dead. They couldn't take it. And within minutes, nurses and doctors came in and said, you can't feed these people that. And they started taking them, cleaning them up, delousing them, and taking them in place and giving them bath.
So just to clarify, because I'm seeing in the comments over here, that interview was in 2015. The date was on the lower third, but you might have missed that on the lower third. Rick Carrier, original Antifa soldier in an original Antifa uniform, with an amazing story. He seems, Jennifer, like such an amazing man in that interview.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's so, I think so many people forget just how bad it was at the end. I mean, they had plans to either blow up concentration camps when they knew that basically it was up and they were done, or to basically just mass murder everybody that was left in the concentration camps. I actually TA'd classes on the Holocaust and American life, and then Nazi Germany and the Holocaust when I was still taking classes at UW. And so we actually showed students some of the videos that were made when they were actually liberating the camps, because they went in and took videos for evidence at the Nuremberg trials. And so there were actually people that collected, SS officers that collected shoes, they collected jewelry, they had mass pits of dead bodies. And a lot of the German people were like, we didn't know what was going on, but these same people in the villages down below saying they didn't know what was going on were actually going up and reburying the bodies farther away because they could smell them down in the town and they didn't like it. So the German people were actually very much complicit in this. So I think there's so much people still don't fully understand about the Holocaust, but it's an important thing to learn about because it's not something that could never happen again. I mean, we've seen civil war, genocide, all of these things, not to the degree of the Holocaust, but it is something that eventually could be repeated if we don't remember what happened 7 decades ago.
Yeah. I'd like to add to that story in that I had an opportunity to speak to a gentleman named Joe. Joe was in the Armored Infantry Division, Battalion 6, and was among the first U.S. troops inside the Buchenwald death camp. And Joe got to tell me about his experience. What he told me was, first of all, they were a little frustrated with the prisoners. They had orders to take any guards they found alive for interrogation, and the prisoners had killed almost every guard in the place. And it is from Joe's account that I learned, in some cases, ripping them apart with their bare hands. They did have a small group of guards that they were there that were being held at gunpoint. They took charge of them. The U.S. troops were so angered, so horrified by what they saw. My father told me that the squad that they were in, I just gave away the punchline by accident. The squad that they were in made them stand on a pile of rotting corpses and told them that if they got off that pile, they would shoot them. He told me that the smell was unthinkable, beyond comprehension, and how they were just scarecrows. They were just human scarecrows.
Yeah.
Skin, bones, barely able to move, covered in their own filth, and shared the same story that Rick Carrier shared. Ones that got food would eat the food and drop dead. Their body couldn't process the food. They were ordered by a colonel to not talk about what they saw there. Joe was one of the first people into the camp on the next day after Rick Carrier arrived there. What's really fascinating to me on the Rick Carrier story, Jennifer, is how he talks about hearing machine gun fire. And we know where that machine gun fire was coming from when we learn the rest of the history. Of course, he doesn't know that, but the word is out. The Americans are here. They don't know it's just one American, and they're taking it as this is our opportunity to strike back. Rick Carrier died on December 2nd, 2016. So Rick is no longer with us. Joe died on October 10, 1998. Joe was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Joe is my father. And he was part of the original Antifa army. He put the fun in dysfunctional because of everything that he saw and witnessed in World War II. But I'm damn proud of him tonight. So I was an honor to hear his story, which he told me in one evening, and he never spoke of it again. And I'm sure glad I got to hear it, and I'm sure glad I got to remember it.
Definitely. Props to your father, David. He's a good man.
Mods and admins, what is the winning story? And while we wait for the winning story, we'll do a little pause for the cause.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
Jennifer, go ahead and spam those hearts, by the way. Our community has decided we are not going to end on a high note tonight. I don't think we necessarily ended with the story of my father on a low note. But with that said, the winning story tonight is the 28-year-old Joseph Russo arrested in New York City for 3 Asian hate crime attacks. That's the story they want us to unpack. They get to pick the news. We're not a dictatorship here. This is what democracy looks like.
Yeah. Yes.
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
I would have voted for Liebers.
Yeah.
Jennifer, it was my story, so I'll let you go first.
I don't even know where to begin with this and things that we have not already said about the way in which white supremacy functions, systemic, I'm tired, it's Thursday, guys, sorry. Systemic white supremacy functions, and the way in which the nation has always kind of embodied and supported a hatred of Asian peoples, which has been evidenced through numerous acts and legislation throughout history. You know, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, which led to multiple riots on the West Coast. Anti-Chinese violence continued well into the turn of the 20th century. We had the Gentleman's Agreement after that between the US and Japan, which fundamentally limited the kinds of Japanese people that could immigrate into the United States. There's been a whole bunch of stereotypes aimed at Asian people, and Asian is such a broad term and encompasses so many cultures and people that it's not even really an accurate term, but many Americans, particularly many white Americans, cannot differentiate between different Asian cultures, so they've all been lumped into one seeming culture. I don't even know where to go with this story, David. It's grotesque. I don't know what possesses somebody to behave in that way and to, do that kind of stuff. But I hope he pays some pretty significant consequences for it.
And that's part of it. If there were significant consequences for these actions, there would be less of these actions. We hear this all the time from the back the blue and the people that commit these kind of things. Their side want the book thrown at criminals. But when it comes to the other side, all of a sudden they don't care. I mean, Jennifer, did you see the big Quanon protest for Matt Gaetz and Save the Children?
Oh my God. Why?
It's just silence. It's just silence, right? And it's just another example of that. Jennifer, I don't know if we talked about the myth of model minorities when you were on the show or not. You've been on the show now for almost a half a year. Were you on the show when we did that story?
No, you didn't, but we did talk a little bit about it because there's actually a lot of scholarship about the model minority and the myth of the model minority. One of the best ones is actually written by a journalist who identifies as Asian American. But yeah, it's written by a journalist and really works to kind of refute the myth of the model minority. And part of the whole model minority thing is really gross anyways, because what it does is it pits minority groups against each other and, basically creates tension and further cements systems of white supremacy.
Yes, exactly. And our history in I know the story is out of New York. Our history of Pacific Northwest is particularly horrible when it comes to Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans. I'll tell this little anecdote. There is this trope that Chinese restaurants serve cats and dogs, right? Where did this trope come from? The United States passed very onerous laws that basically blocked Chinese immigration. However, there were a couple of loopholes. And one of the loopholes was essentially if you needed chef or hospitality workers for a fine dining establishment, then you could bring people in from other cultures in Asia. Hence, this is why we have Chinese restaurants all over the United States. They exploded. And in the day, they were very fancy places to eat. And Americans were instantly curious about the Chinese restaurants because of the fancy look and the fancy service and the white coats. And guess what? This started hurting business. Mm-hmm. And so how are we going to deal with that? Are we going to up our service? Are we going to serve better food? Are we going to diversify our menu? No. We're going to create rumors that you're eating dogs and cats at the Chinese restaurant. It's just like one little example out of our history, and the trope lives today.
Yeah, and I would just like to point out that the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act was the first piece of legislation passed by the U.S. government that targeted a specific ethnic group.
Jennifer dropping the history truth on us, and I love it. Jennifer, I've been reading the comments, and they're in full sectarian violence. I don't know if you've seen it over there. There is tear gas and flashbang grenades, and they are beating each other with poles because they want me to push a button, and I'm going to push the button.
Push it.
It's a squirrel.
Welcome, giant pansies. Please feel free to bask in my glow.
Definitely a squirrel.
Yep, squirrel.
We definitely have squirrels in our yard, Jennifer. They're like, welcome to my presence.
Yeah. Pretty much. I have issues with the squirrels on campus because they're used to getting so much food when students are on campus all the time. So one time I was going back to my office and I had this like bag of almonds in my purse and I was like, oh, here, little squirrel. And it came riding like right over to the top of my foot. So I was like, hey, dude, just back up. We don't have to do this because I talk to squirrels. And so I finally ended up just dumping out my bag of almonds for it. And it very much appreciated it, but it like ran over to me like a dog and I was a little bit alarmed.
They can be super, and they are crazy smart. We've watched them in the yard. And they could be crazy smart. Dora, I saw your comment about loving the movie Madagascar. I love it too, because any movie that has this line exchange, which will be forever etched in my head. Well, the penguins are going. The penguins are psychotic. Just the whole idea of psychotic penguins warms my heart.
Yes, I agree.
The other one is, it's the man, cute and cuddly, boys. The penguins have like all of the great lines there, and I know that they tried to change. I know that they tried a cartoon where they tried to give the penguins their own show, and the writing was terrible. It just didn't work.
Yeah. It'd be like trying to give the hyenas from The Lion King their own show. They were great in the movie with the rest of the characters, but.
The other one that I love that the penguin, there's a third penguin line that I love. Commence Operation Epic Fail now. I've used that one in corporate America, privately on the inside. Jennifer, wonderful show. I'm glad that we were able to finish with Lemur so we could finish on a high note. We do listen to the protest vote. Yes, and you've been shuffling.
Moving to the comment section.
So Malcontents, we are planning to stream live on Saturday down in Tacoma. There is an event celebrating Black business and Black culture. The plan right now is to go down and stream that. There is also supposed to be an action on Sunday where we're going to be celebrating like White Lives Matter and white. And right now we're planning to go to that, although I will say the chatter on it is relatively quiet. There's a fair number of people who are just kind of feeling like this is just a BS thing to stir. But we're planning to be there with the camera. And then, Jennifer, we'll see you on Monday.
Yes. Good night, everyone. Good
night,
David.
everybody. And thank you for for our patrons and those who Venmo. We love you. You help keep the lights on.
Malcontent
I'm
News
gonna
is
go
a team
disappear
of
behind
journalists,
comments
activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrorist.